Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I am Rabbi Lustig, or I guess tonight I'm Rabbi Lustig. I want to welcome you to our opening of our Amram Scholar Series. As well, I want to welcome you to the Washington Hebrew congregation, a congregation of the heart, a community of the Spirit. We are Washington's oldest and largest synagogue. We have been at the crossroads of compassion and community activism for 165 years here in the District of Columbia, living the values of our Reform Jewish ideology. Today, we are honored to co-host with the German Embassy the Washington premiere of the documentary film Germans and Jews. This event reflects the core questions of this film. How in 70 years have the dynamics of the relationship between Germans and Jews evolved? How have we moved from the often unspoken pain and horror of the Holocaust to the robust dialogue of self-reflection and perhaps even reconciliation? And there is no better time for us as Jews to express these themes. For around the world as Jews, we are in the month of Elul, the preparatory month of self-reflection that precedes our high holidays, and on Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, we will each question who we are and who we want to be. We will do perhaps teshuvah, the turning necessary to be better than we are. Tonight, this evening, is a product of the brilliance of our German ambassador to the United States, Peter Witting, previously the German ambassador to the UN, and of his incredibly dynamic wife, Herberta von Voss-Witting. They conceived this evening, and we have watched as they have turned their home into the apex of cultural excellence and intellectual honesty. From their holding Berlin salons to gathering Washington's Holocaust survivors, hosting them each year, and events such as tonight, they have enriched our community beyond measure. I also want to thank Leslie Maitland, our Amram Scholar Chair and a scholar herself, and as well Naomi Abelson, our program director, and the combined staffs of our Washington Hebrew congregation and the Embassy's Office of Social Protocol. They've done an excellent job. I've watched Ambassador Witting this past month honor one of the monument men in his home, open an exhibit in his residence on Leo Baeck and the Jewish thinkers of Germany. Mr. Ambassador, we are honored to share this event, but more, we are honored and humbled with gratitude for your continual interest and affection for Washington's Jewish community. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to present to you the ambassador from Germany to the United States, Ambassador Peter Witting, who I am honored to also call my friend. Ambassador.
Rabbi Lustig, Leslie Maitland, Tal and Janina, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbi Lustig, first of all, let me thank you for your most kind and flattering introduction. And it is a tremendous honor for me to be here with you. And I have to admit I'm overwhelmed by the turnout this evening. It's really amazing. But then on the other hand, it's not so amazing because, as I was told, this is one of the largest Hebrew Reform congregations worldwide. So I'm really honored to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, in one of the opening scenes of the film Germans and Jews, which we're going to see, Fritz Stern, the eminent historian, who we sadly lost this year, Fritz Stern says, "I'm afraid I have to say my hatred for Germans was immense." And he was describing how he felt when he, for the first time, traveled to Germany after the war. He was not and is not alone in his feelings. Many Jews today still feel suspicion towards Germans and towards Germany, understandably so, after the undescribable atrocities of the Holocaust, planned, organized, and carried out by Germans. Yes, and this is also made clear in one of the opening scenes of the movie we are about to see. Since the end of the Second World War, many Jews have come to stay and live in Germany. Berlin's Jewish community is as vibrant as the city itself. And it's one of the fastest growing Jewish communities worldwide. So Jewish life is back in Germany. So how did this happen? How did we get there after the catastrophe of the Holocaust? And how do German-Jewish relations actually stand today? Ladies and gentlemen, the film Germans and Jews tries to find answers to these questions. A difficult endeavor. Obviously, it cannot be summed up in a simple sentence. The movie's approach to these questions is twofold. First, it lets Jewish and non-Jewish Germans living in Berlin speak for themselves. Of course, a contentious and often emotional discussion and debate develops, where we see a great deal of understanding and common ground, but where we also see disagreement between Jews and Germans, even among themselves. Doesn't surprise me, knowing the inclination of Jews and Germans for debate and discussion. And it reminds me, if I may say so, of the night-long discussions that my wife and I had with Jewish friends, including Tal and Janina, in our homes in New York and here in D.C. And secondly, the film Germans and Jews lets the past speak. It approaches the questions of Jewish-German relations through history. Being born in the 50s, I personally remember how slowly many Germans were willing to change, how much resistance there was against commemorating and against admitting one's guilt and responsibility. The denial and the attempt to repress one's guilt and responsibility. The denial to attempt to repress the responsibility for the murder and the atrocity until the late 50s. The Eichmann trial in 1961 and the Auschwitz trial in Frankfurt 1963, which for the first time made the German public open the eyes to the crimes of the Holocaust. Then the younger generation, the post-war generation, that questioned their parents and eventually called the atrocities by their name in the late 60s. And then the German president Richard von Weizsäcker, who in 1985 bravely stated what should have been clear by then, but was still not clear to some of my fellow Germans, that with the defeat of Nazi Germany, my country had been liberated, not only defeated, but liberated. And that this liberation from Nazism was the prerequisite of the modern, democratic, and tolerant Germany. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm grateful to be able to live in today's Germany of democracy and tolerance. where people fleeing war and civil war and terror are given a refuge, where Jewish life is possible again. I'm grateful to be able to represent this country that has traded war and barbarism for peace and cooperation, and whose foreign policy is firmly based on the very special and indeed excellent relationship with the State of Israel and support for its people. Ladies and gentlemen, my generation, and even more so the generation of my children, have only known this liberal, enlightened Germany. And to some who were born so long after the end of the Second World War, this may seem something of a given. But let us also be honest. Xenophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism are still present in today's Europe and also in today's Germany. Populism is back and is on the rise. Some people seem to have grown wary of fighting these developments. Ladies and gentlemen, over the years, Fritz Stern ultimately became a close friend of my country and also a very close personal friend of me and my wife. He was impressed by the way Jewish-German relations had developed, but he was also far from naive, as conveyed by his words in one of the final scenes of the movie. He admonishes, saying, and I quote, "The challenge will be to explain this to the new generation. This cannot be taken for granted. This needs to be defended," end of quote. And the film Germans and Jews teaches us this very clearly. It shows flourishing Jewish life in Germany today. It explains how long and how difficult it was to regain trust among Jews. And that's why we need to continue to protect and defend this trust, to defend Jewish life in Germany. Tal, Janina, you have done a marvelous job. Thank you for this. And I'm grateful that we all can enjoy this work of art together tonight here in the Hebrew Temple of Washington, D.C. Thank you for your attention.
Just, I grew up with it, so I didn't quite realize how unknown it is outside of Germany. Plus, it's a very sensitive topic, so I was really thinking, do I really want to get involved? But I think what in the end convinced me is that my husband is actually Jewish. We live in the United States, but our children have this German-Jewish heritage now, and it was a way for me to kind of find a way to explain also all these nuances and path the way for them to understand.
How did you go about picking the participants to participate in both the dinner and in the creation of the film? Because they're each strong characters, and what was that process like?
Okay, the dinner sort of represents the people, our Tal's and my generation. And I should say also that we've known each other for a long time and talked about these issues. So the dinner was the idea to how to bring this to our generation, much later, and move the whole topic forward. So that was sort of the age group. But the people that are represented in the film, one person led to the other. We came to Berlin. The first person was Torsten, the tour guide, the amazing guy. He made suggestions. We had friends. Tal had friends. And just one person led to the other. And in the end, we have twice as many people as are in the film. We had to cut down.
So they were edited out in
Yes.
terms of. So I wanted to ask you, Tal, do you think that the people in the film are representative of society today? Do you think it's a fair representation?
I think what we were getting at in the film was trying to show the gestalt of the country. In other words, usually when there are films made about Germany, it's about the neo-Nazis or whatever. Well, that's not the vast majority of Germans. And Germany has definitely, we wanted to show how today really democracy, democratic values have become the core of what's important in Germany. Like Herbert says, I'm not patriotic about saying I'm a German. Nationalism isn't it. It's the issue of I very much am proud of being a German because of the strong democratic values and so on. If we would see the rest of the film,
we will.
There's more about that.
I'm a man of great faith.
Okay. So, because we sort of leave you hanging with all these negative, our point of the film was to show a lot of the nuances. I think we got at the big picture. You know, yes, we did it in Berlin because we felt Berlin is now the center of Germany, but there are Jewish communities, and large ones in Frankfurt, in Munich, in other cities. Holocaust remembrance, the building of these memorials has gone on all over West Germany. I think we also explained the differences between the East and the West and the culture of memory.
And I think the layout of this film is beautiful. I think the representation it's amazing because, you know, you have this moment where Ariel who does not want to admit at all that he is a German at all. He's simply a Jew. And then there's that tense moment where the woman looks and says, you know, Jews, you're always interrupting. And then there's the other dynamic where there's the Israeli who's sitting there and saying, you know, I just came to Berlin because it's trendy, you know. But there's this, you know, go ahead.
And they're all very valid. You know, I think everybody in it's after this event, I think how people deal with it in the end is a very personal way of how to live on with it. And I think Ariel's story is as valid as what Arik, the musician, feels, or for that matter, also Germans feel.
Well, there was something that struck me, and, you know, I'm a child of a Holocaust survivor. I grew up in a time when, you know, there was never a German product in the house, although my mother reminded me that they would be the best products if we had them. And the reality is that Ariel says that in his generation, and Dr. Stern says this in his generation, the profound difficulty and hate that's there. And I want to turn to you, Leslie, because I know in writing Crossing the Borders of Time, and by the way, seeing it published in German, you know, I thought it was difficult. It was an ominous thing. It's an incredible book, and it's very, very good. But I think it weighs about 65 pounds in German. So, you know, you, in the process of this, of over 10 years, how did your own experience researching Germany, your mother's feelings of returning to her native land, compare to what you see in the film? Because I know you've spoken about this.
Right. Well, firstly, I want to thank the Wittigs for bringing this film to our attention and for all they do to enhance German-Jewish communication. I have to say it was really because of German government efforts at reconciliation that I wrote my book in the first place. Because although I grew up...
Hold the book, my cloak.
Although I grew up in part of New York with so many German-Jewish refugees that it was dubbed the Fourth Reich, and I think I heard more German as a child than I did English, the idea of going to Germany had never even crossed my mother's mind. It was as remote as going to the moon, until we were invited there in 1985 by the town where she was born, Freiburg, which we saw a bit of in the film. We went to Freiburg, and one of the first places she wanted to see, of course, was the house where she was born. It was right next to a hotel, and the hotel had taken over my grandfather's home to expand the hotel in 1938, when it was no longer permissible for Jews to own property. So we went there, and my mother said, "Oh my God, if only I could see the inside of my old house one more time." And I said, "Well, you can. I'll knock on the door." And she said, "No, no, no, you can't do that." And I, being a reporter, I said, "Of course I'll do that." And I knocked on the door, and we were directed to the top floor. In the top floor, the house had been turned into an apartment building. There was the son of the owner. He was about 36 years old. He took one look at my mother, and I said, "My mother lived here before the war, and she would so much love to see her old home once again." He said, "Oh my God, Frau Gunzberger, I've waited all my life to see you. How is it possible that I do not even know how this house came into my family? I've always wanted to know. Come in, sit down." He poured her brandy, even though it was in the morning. And he said, I'm so excited to see you. And after a little bit, he said he wanted to bring my mother downstairs to see his mother, who occupied a different apartment. We go down to see his mother, and she had been a childhood friend of my mother's. And so there was this amazing encounter between the two women. And his mother said to my mother, Frau Stock said, you must have lived very well in America on all the money that my father paid to your father. And my mother said, really? We left here with 10 Deutschmarks each, the equivalent of $2.50 a person. And Frau Stock said, then why did we have to pay anything for this house? It was very hard for my family. And my mother said, you would have to go ask the Fuhrer, because all the money was put into a blocked account that we could never access. And so things were very testy between them, but Michael, her son, and I became good friends. And several months later, Michael would come to America, come to my mother's house, stay in my parents' house for several weeks, and spend Passover with us. He would sit at our Passover table and eat matzah, and he would read from the Haggadah, including the part that said, in every generation they will rise up to smite us. And so I was incredibly moved that this happened. In subsequent years, I went back to Germany several times to do reporting, and each time, as you describe in the movie, the complexities of the relationships were so fascinating. On the one hand, Frau Stock would invite me for coffee and put out an entire table laden with cakes and pastries. On the other hand, she would bring me into her bedroom, the very room where my mother had been born, and show me her Hitler Youth certificate still hanging in a frame on the wall. And yet on that very same trip, Michael would go to the hotel where I was staying and insist upon paying my bill behind my back and would not accept payment back because he said, why should you have to pay a hotel bill in the very town where I am living in your home? And so we had so many amazing experiences, and watching your film just brought those all back in such an incredibly poignant and real way. So I thank you for it.
And I think books like Crossing the Border of Time, some other books that we have shared in the Amram Scholars, our discussions of the generation that's dealing with this, are all dealing with this whole idea of how do we reconcile with the idea of the new Germany. And, as a Reform rabbi who's struggling with all the issues and trying to motivate not only our community, but communities in terms of the issues of immigration and doing the right thing, and then here we turn and Germany is in the forefront, and doing this. And so when we see our democratic and some of our most liberal values being represented, it's a very challenging and interesting concept to deal with, and not master statusing Germany, which is what Dr. Stern said, why focus on this, certainly an important part of the history, but only this point is to miss the beauty in terms of, what, if anything, did you learn or surprised you in the process of making this film?
I think there were many, many things, but I think the thing I came away with the most was how Germany integrated the Jewish narrative into their own. And I think this is a very, very unique thing. I think that if you look at other countries, Austria, some of the Eastern European countries, Japan, they haven't really confronted their past. And by confronting your past, you also heal, I think. And you can embrace certain values that otherwise are very difficult to embrace. And I think, when you look at what Germany does also in its foreign policy, the past is always in the back of their mind in a very positive way.
A Berlin Auschwitz sign, and it's covered with snow. And just through the pure white, you see the image behind it of what was. But it can't stop what's covering it, the purity in terms of that. And I think what's so beautiful about your film is that you've brought to bear, and I think it's exemplary of the ambassador and his wife, who I have seen embrace the cultural exchange and the intellectual honesty that makes me proud that my form of Judaism, Reform Judaism, was birthed in Germany was birthed with these liberal understandings, with these things, which made it so incredibly hard for people who came out of that democratic type of environment to believe out of that beautiful sand, soft sand, would come such a piercing thorn as the Holocaust. But your film really talks about that whole cycle of reconciliation. So I want to congratulate you on a beautiful film. I want to thank you for giving us this incredible opportunity. And I want to say that it's to me so important that this took place in a synagogue in a time where we are called B'nai Yisrael. And what does the word Israel really mean? It means to strive. It is the one who strives. And you give us that opportunity to challenge. And Leslie, just as your book and all the things that you've done for the Scholar Series, this was a wonderful idea. And Saturday night we will turn to Slichot, where we will begin the process of repentance. And I think it's a very challenging question that your films ask us. How will we perceive others despite their past? How we will build a future together? And that destiny is our own shared responsibility. And that is shown by the collaborative work between a Jew and a German, between two individuals who did a beautiful piece of artwork. So we thank you very much.
Can I just say one last thing?
Yes.
I just want to thank the rabbi, thank Leslie, and of course, thank the Wittigs, who were behind us and helped us, and we love them very, very much. And to my wonderful partner. So I just had to say that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.